what a pleasure to be here. What could be better than spending an evening around beautiful art and wonderful, beautiful people like you?
I wanted to make sure that there was very strong reference to Oscar Wilde, because I see him being sent to jail and his life being ruined. Oscar Wilde does pave the way for the Wolfenden report that came out of a lot of very tragic situations. You've got a reference to Oscar and with this as well. It's interesting that the lesbian side of this was more invisibly treated. There was no real acknowledgement of women.
I think for all LGBT people, we've always been very concerned with our liberty, because historically it can be taken away from you in a second. And Oscar Wilde has to be the biggest martyr of it, if you like.
It's very easy to engage with something, a subject like the law, in quite reductive ways. The initial thoughts that you might have around things like Lady Justice and Blind Justice and scales and all of those sorts of things. And I thought, no, that's not what I want. That's not how I want to talk about things. I want to talk about the real impact on real lives and it be less abstract than that.
1 million of us are here to show love wins. No pride in war. Make love, not war. It's really important to go out and celebrate Pride and be out on the streets and saying who we are. I don't think any rights that you get are ever given. And I think when prejudices are there, they never go away. They just sort of get below the carpet. So it's important to say we are who we are and we have the right to be who we are and to love who we want to love.
Because I knew the theme was gay marriage, so I thought I will actually do a picture, to commemorate gay marriage.
"38 Green Carnations" provides two aspects of Wilde's life. The early privileged family and successful background of one of the world's most brilliant and witty writers is reflected in a portrait by Fionn Wilson of the younger man set against fabric by the fashionable Victorian designer of the time, William Morris. There are panels of bars which are a stark indicator of the incarceration of Wilde in Reading Jail in 1895, when tragedy ruined his life, family and career. With homosexuality considered an illness and crime, the court case at the Old Bailey in 1895 resulted in Wilde receiving a 2-year prison sentence with hard labour. After his release 2 years later, Wilde wandered through parts of Europe before his death in 1900 and burial in Paris.
I'm not a painter, I'm a trained photographer. I was very lucky. I was given a residency at the Highgate Centre and I was really thoroughly encouraged to paint. So I did. This is how he arrived. It was a very long conversation about trying to be yourself in a world where everybody else wants you to be something else. The paintings I took reference from were illustrious female portraits, beautifully painted, the greatest painters of the day, Gainsborough, Reynolds. There was a huge school of thought with regards to how women are projected. I wanted to show this man and his honesty. I was really proud of myself that I painted him because he was my first one. Well, what would it be like for a black man who is into wearing women's clothes in the 17th century? But more importantly, what would happen if he took the dress and wore it himself? Because it's quite nice to see him up off his knees and in the chair for a change. And for me, that's where I really wanted to make this point, that we've come a long way from slave painting. It's quite all right to be a gentleman of colour and wear women's clothes. But I think for me, I wanted to show his fear and his determination to be himself, although it's behind closed doors. He is not, his gaze doesn't belong to the audience. He's watching the door, and I have no idea why he's watching the door.
Sue Kreutzmann being an outsider artist, and she supports the LGBT community very much. And her also being Jewish makes it quite interesting. Her playing the role of the registrar. I wanted to give back to her what she also gives to the LGBT community. And I thought she looks there as a person of acceptance, as an icon. So I wanted something red, definitely, because I thought it would be really strong. I wanted really strong colors for this, so that, you know, it just jumps on you and you really notice it. That's what I wanted. I used to do the male body, the male nude. In the 90s, there were loads of photographers photographing the female, and the female was at a higher level than the male, so I wanted to push the male on the same level as the female, and that's why I concentrated on doing the male.
I chose these particular images because I think that there's quite a lot of misunderstanding around the law in relation particularly to trans people. There's also a lot of people who aren't really covered by the law. The law is quite basic in some of its interpretations, and it holds at its heart a stereotype of trans people, really, that a lot of people don't fit. And so what I was aiming to do with these particular images is to draw out some of the areas where certain areas of law that are meant to support trans people actually clash somewhat with other areas of law. So, for example, things around parenting and who gets called a father on a birth certificate, what might happen where laws in other countries are perhaps a little more inclusive at the moment and allow for more options on key identity documentation like passports, and have options other than simply male or female. You know, our systems just aren't geared up to accommodate it. What I found interesting was that it was quite technically challenging as well to find what I wanted. I suddenly realised when I went through, bought a load of periodicals, you know, to collage from, I suddenly realised there is a dominant look that people have, which I presume is to do with how people engage with magazines, and also nearly everybody is looking out of the page, not looking towards another person. So I was really limited in some of my choices for people who were looking towards each other. And where I in fact found some of those images, or most of those images, was in the brochures from adult colleges where people were engaging with each other in the course of learning, and I thought that was a very interesting thing that I hadn't even realised would be part of the process, just starting to understand how magazines actually engage us in certain ways and what kinds of imagery are used, because, you know, I was talking about that, I was aware of certain aspects of it, but there were other aspects of it which had been invisible to me.
I'm just going to read out a quote from someone who was also on Lesbian Strength, and that's part of this image. What Marge Spence said was, anyway, we went to Hyde Park Corner to the Lesbian Strength March, and I just felt like I belonged. And I'd always kind of felt inferior throughout my life for different reasons, being black, being overweight, being someone that fancied women. And I wasn't supposed to, being a single parent. But here I felt really safe, I felt empowered. So I've always been taking photographs right through as a sort of photographer participant. And this year, Loudest Whispers has a theme of citizenship and the law, and it made just complete sense given I've got so many photos to actually amass them into a collected thing, that starts with a very large Stop the Colours photo from 1987 and goes right up to Pride 2016. It is still just as important to parade, celebrate and challenge in 2017 as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of male homosexuality in England and Wales. Never more so. Now we have Trumpageddon and the likelihood of a Brexit, which the move towards has already increased the sexism, racism and homophobia in Britain today.
And then every year we get the absolute tops when we get the LGBT celebration and the art exhibition here with all its colour and hope and fun. And it's very, very important to the people that use this building, whether they're patients or staff, that they see this and that they participate in it. So it's really, really great to have you all here this evening. It's very important that you come here, that you are part of this community, and it makes such a huge difference in terms of combating another type of stigma, which is equally pernicious in our society.
Grabbed her double-barrel gun. She tracked him down and shot him dead as pay for what he'd done. Now so love their gambling queens on out to set by none. The man they raised a glass and cried. She we don't know what she'd done. There's no crossing that bad mustache. Ain't no man gonna leave with none. The first of the double-barrel gun. You think you'll cross old Sheriff's Thorn, I suggest you settle on down.